Welcome to episode number 2, where we'll be hopping into the 2-5 game at the Aria. The buy-in for this game is between 200 and 1,000, and rest assured there are plenty of people who opt in for the full buy-in, which provides the opportunity to play some deep stack poker. We're not at the Bellagio, as featured during the last video, but we'll hopefully make our way back there sometime in the near future. Let's get into the hands. Okay guys, immediate premium hand as we sit down. We post our big blind and look at pocket queens. There are 3 limpers, including the button, before it gets back to me, and I raise to 35. The late position and button call. Since I sat down at this table just a moment ago, there really isn't any ongoing history to mention here, so these two should be playing relatively straightforward. The flop comes 8-6-4. I lead off for $45, and the action folds to the button, who decides to give the confused look, and then raise to 95. Her raising range here should mostly comprise of hands that have a good amount of equity against an overpair like queens. Since this is a min-raise, I opt to call and evaluate the turn. The turn brings the 6 of diamonds, which relatively is a good card since it reduces the likelihood of available sets and doesn't complete any obvious draws such as 3-5 or 9-7 suited. I check and she bets 145, leaving herself with roughly 225 behind. This is the pivotal point of this hand, where I think the decision to fold or raise all in are probably the 2 best options. After some thought, I came to the conclusion that if it was possible she was semi-bluffing at a small frequency here, I should just move in. Besides, I didn't come to Vegas to fold. Unfortunately, I get snapped off without any hesitation. I immediately table my hand, announcing that I must be crushed. The button shows pocket 4s as the dealer puts out the 6 of hearts river, which counterfeits her boat and gives me the better full house. Wow, talk about being a luck box. Early on in the session, there was a pretty good table dynamic, though after the first hand with pocket queens, I ended up mostly card dead for many orbits. And I mean many. But hey, sometimes that just happens. And the hands weren't necessarily all that bad, just mediocre, weak hands in terrible position. I did eventually pick up ace-jack, and I was able to eke out a street of value on a jack-high board for a small win. And I did the same with pocket 8s in a small, inconsequential pot. And there were other hands, such as the queen 7 suited, which ended up being a swing and a miss. Eventually, I saw the game turn from a decent one into a terrible one, with most of the table simply limping in, then folding to any raise unless they had a big hand they were trapping with. This was my sign to call it quits, and I was about to until I saw 2 new players sit down at the opposite side of the table. The best description I could give is that they were both recreational players, having fun, and donating to the rest of the table. For brevity, from now on we'll just refer to them as VIP 1 and number 2. Yellow chip after yellow chip magically appeared from their pockets in quick succession as chips flew around the table. My general goal for this vlog is to keep the content relatively light on the technical side of things, and to keep things more entertaining, but for these final few hands we're going to slightly deviate and go into a little bit more analysis. In the first of these hands, I find myself with pocket jacks on the button. The VIP opens for 20, and both the Aria reg to his direct left and another player call before I make it 115 on the button. This is a slight overbet as I'm looking to isolate the initial raiser since it's clear the low jack has been overcalling all sorts of marginal hands intentionally. Only the VIP and the Aria reg end up calling while the cutoff checks out. The flop is 10-4-5. Both players check to me and I continue for $95 and just the VIP calls. The 6 on the turn does make the board a lot more connected, but once it's checked over to me, I bet 175 and the VIP calls again. The river is a 7, which puts a 4-liner on the board, and now the VIP leads out for 200, which is one of those pretty gross situations. Normally this is a much closer spot, and in a vacuum might actually be a fold, especially in lower stakes. Jacks here are one of the worst overpairs to have in this situation, as I block many of the Jack-10 combinations I'd want the other player to have available in their range. The VIP has been playing all sorts of suited and unsuited 3-gappers, so his range is considerably widened here. I need to be good here roughly 16% of the time to make this a profitable call, where my specific hand versus his range I'm closer to 42%. Although I'm not liking it, I toss in the call and get shown pocket eights for the river street. On the very next hand, I look down at my cards and find ace-king. The same VIP raises to 20, and since it looks like I'm on full-blown tilt, I raise to 95 expecting to get far less credit for a premium hand. The plan seems to work as he decides to call. I'm happy to see king 10-8 on the flop. Playing in flow, he checks, I continue for 90, and he quickly calls. The turn is a queen of hearts, which makes the board a lot more dynamic, and questionably strengthens a perceived range advantage. So while I could easily have middle-of-the-road 3-bet hands like ace-jack, queen-king, queen-jack, and jack-9, his calling range could have some of the same hands as well. The VIP checks, and I follow suit to exert some pot control. The deuce of clubs on the river should be mostly a blank here, and when he checks again, I think about what kind of hands calls a sizable pre-flop raise, flop continuation, but then checks the turn and the river. While our opponent might be a loose recreational player, he's not maniacal, so he likely has some marginal value hand here. So after some deliberation, I come to the conclusion that my hand is still likely good here, and opt for a larger sizing of 300 to set up a bluff catching scenario. He thinks for about 15 seconds and ends up calling. I show ace-king, and he shows the bad news with the very same hand down to the suit. Pocket eights again, for a flop set. At this point, I'm not exactly sure what to think, as everyone seemingly is getting paid from this opponent, but somehow I've become his personal ATM. In hindsight, I guess I should just be glad he didn't put in the check raise on the river. I added on for 800 more to top off my stack, and shortly after got into a really interesting all-in situation on the final hand. Unfortunately, I didn't get footage of this hand, so I'll share the notes. I had king-queen suited under the gun and raised to 20. The usual suspects of the VIP opponent and the Aria reg to his left called. The flop is 8-9-10 with 2 clubs, and it checks around to the Aria pro, who bets 40. Both of us call. We bink the turn, which is the glorious jack of spades, and I check, and now the VIP leads out for 100. The Aria pro calls 100, and now I check raise to 445, leaving myself with roughly 300 behind. My read on the situation was that the VIP likely had a straight here, and I was hoping it was the queen high straight since there was a 4-liner on the board. However, sadly the VIP folds, but the reg calls. The river is a 4 of clubs, which is a terrible river in retrospect, but I had already decided that I was not folding on any non-board pairing river, so I shipped the rest of my stack in, only to be called by king 10 of clubs. It would be an understatement to say that this session did not go as well as I had intended. I cash out a few orbits after. In for 2800, out for 679. Thank you guys for joining me on another poker vlog. Episode 3, we will be taking it to the streets of California to hopefully run into an elusive podcaster in San Diego County. I appreciate you so much for watching up to this point and hope you find these videos entertaining. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and see you next time.